I don't even know why I'm writing this. Maybe to make sense of it. Maybe because I've run out of people to talk to. Or maybe because I found a note in the freezer this morning, a wrinkled old receipt for dish soap and oat milk, and it reminded me of a time when my wife used to leave me sweet notes like that. She used to scribble dumb messages on anything she could find and hide them in the strangest places. One time, she wrote, "I miss your dumb face" on the back of a gas station receipt and slipped it into my sock drawer. That was 4 years ago. Yeah? I haven't heard her voice in 11 days. Not in passing, not in anger, not even by accident. My name's Lowell. I'm 42, from Maryland, and I used to be married to a woman named Margot. I say used to even though legally nothing's changed. She still wears her ring. I still pay the gas bill. But if you asked me when I lost her, I wouldn't say last week, last month, or even last year. I'd say it was the night she stopped correcting me. It sounds small, right? But she always used to interrupt me when I mispronounced words or got dates wrong. It was her annoying little habit, and I secretly loved it. But that one night last November, I said chifforobe when I meant armoire, and she just let it go. No sigh. No playful jab. Nothing. She didn't even look up from her phone. That was the first time I noticed I was becoming invisible in my own house. Now don't get me wrong, I'm no prize. I'm not wealthy. I'm not rugged or charming or wildly successful. I run a small print shop out of a converted garage and wear orthopedic slippers when I work because my feet hurt. I talk too much about things no one cares about, like pen ink saturation and recycled paper stock. I over-apologize. I overthink. I underreact. But I never stopped loving her. I made her coffee every morning, even after she stopped drinking it. I left her side of the bed warm when she started falling asleep on the couch. I bought that lavender lotion she liked even though she never touched it again. For a while, I thought it was just a phase. Work stress. Seasonal depression. But the silence kept getting louder and her absence kept becoming more present. Then came the whispers, not from her, but from our house. I'd walk past the closed bathroom door and hear her voice, but not directed at me. At someone else. I'd knock. She'd flush and say, "What?" like I was interrupting something sacred. Once, I saw her laughing alone on the balcony at midnight. I asked what was funny. She said, "Nothing you'd understand," and walked past me without even a glance. That night I cried. In the closet. Quietly, so she wouldn't hear. And that's the part that still embarrasses me. Not the crying, but the hiding it. Then came the day I knew it was over. It wasn't dramatic. No big fight. No betrayal I could point at. It was a Tuesday. Rainy. I was microwaving leftover spaghetti. She walked in, looked right past me, and said to the dog, "Let's go, Benny." That was it. No hi. No eye contact. Not even a nod. I could have been a coat rack. And she left with the dog without even asking if I needed anything. I stood there, spaghetti forgotten, heart aching in the dumbest way possible, not because she ignored me, but because she used to ask if I wanted iced tea when it rained. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan. It spun like always. But something inside me had stopped spinning. I didn't get angry. I didn't yell. I didn't pack a suitcase or slam a door. I just felt hollow. Not broken. Just done. And the next morning, before sunrise, I did something I never imagined I'd have the courage to do. I took the crumpled receipt out of the freezer, the last note I ever got from her, even if it wasn't meant to be one, and placed it on her pillow. Then I walked out the front door with a single duffel bag and no idea where I was going. No letter. No text. No confrontation. I disappeared. But I didn't vanish into nothing. Because what happened after I left, that's when things really got strange. I didn't go far at first. Just down the street to a cheap motel off Route 4, the kind where the front desk clerk doesn't ask questions and the vending machines hum louder than the TV. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed for nearly an hour before I realized I hadn't packed socks. Or toothpaste. Or a phone charger. It didn't matter. I wasn't planning to stay long. I thought I'd go back in a few days after she noticed I was gone. After she called. After she asked me why. But 3 days passed. Then 5. No messages. No missed calls. No friends reaching out on her behalf. I started to think maybe she was relieved. That maybe my absence was the gift she'd been waiting for. And as stupid as it sounds, that hurt more than anything else. The idea that she might have looked around the house that morning, realized it was finally quiet and empty, and smiled. Still, I kept checking our shared calendar app just to see if she'd left a note or event. Nothing. Just an old entry that read, "Lowell's birthday dinner, reschedule?" That one stung. It had been rescheduled 3 times already. Then silently deleted. No new plans. Just gone like it never mattered. I started driving aimlessly during the day. I visited the boardwalk where we first kissed under cheap string lights. I stopped at a tiny bookstore in town where we used to argue about whether biographies were more depressing than romantic novels. I even drove past her office building once. Not to see her, just to remember a version of myself who used to wait in the car with takeout and feel excited to see her face through the glass. Then something strange happened, the first thing that made me pause and ask, wait, what the hell is going on? On the 7th day, I received a text. Not from her. From my old coworker, Emery. We hadn't talked in months. He wrote, "Hey man. Sorry about everything. That was cold." I stared at the message. Cold? What did he mean? I replied, "What do you mean?" His response came 5 minutes later. "Didn't realize you two split? Just saw the post." Post? I opened Facebook, something I hadn't touched in weeks. There it was. A photo of Margot, smiling, wine in hand, at some rooftop party. The caption was written by her friend, some girl I never liked much. "So happy to see Margot glowing again. New chapters, better vibes, clinking glasses." No mention of me. No separated, no tough times. Just glowing. Like the 11 years we shared had been a fog she'd finally escaped. I should have been angry. But instead I laughed. Not a healthy laugh. A tired, bitter laugh that made the motel's nightstand tremble when I hit it with my open palm. And then I did something incredibly stupid. I opened our old group chat, me, Margot, Emery, and 2 other couples we used to vacation with. I scrolled up. There it was, photos from our last trip. Smiling. Holding hands. And then a new message from just 3 days ago from Margot herself. Finally moving forward. No more pretending. No one responded. No one needed to. That line echoed in my head all night, no more pretending. So all this time she had been pretending. Pretending to still be married. Pretending to be in love. Pretending I still mattered while making silent plans to erase me. But if she thought I was just going to vanish quietly forever, she miscalculated. I wasn't going back, not to beg, not to confront, not to unravel, but to observe. From a distance. To understand what the hell had really happened. Because something wasn't adding up. You don't just detach from 11 years without leaving clues. There had to be more. There was more. And I was going to find it. So I made a list. Yes, like a sad, tired detective with a bad haircut and loose shoelaces, I made a list on a napkin with items like, why second phone never found? Who is Emery texting besides me? What's up with Margot's new chapter? What am I missing? That night, I lay in bed, motel light buzzing above me, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. I wasn't sleeping much anymore. Just blinking slowly through long stretches of silence. And then, at 3:12 a.m., I got up, put on my shoes, and drove back toward our house, not to knock, not to walk in, but to watch. That's when I saw it. A strange car parked in the driveway. Lights still on inside. A man's silhouette walking casually through my kitchen. And Margot? She was standing on the porch. Laughing. I parked a block away. The kind of park job you do when your heart's beating too fast to line up properly with the curb. I cut the engine and just sat there gripping the steering wheel like it might tell me what to do next. My hands were sweating. Not because I was scared, but because it felt like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. I wasn't looking at my house anymore, I was staring at a stage I didn't belong to, watching a performance I hadn't been invited to witness. The porch light flickered above her, that familiar annoying strobe that I'd offered to replace more than once. She'd always said, "It's fine, Lowell. Not everything has to be fixed." And now here she was, standing beneath it wearing the gray hoodie she used to steal from my closet, laughing like nothing in the world had ever hurt her. No sign of grief. No trace of confusion over where I'd gone. Just ease. Lightness. And then he stepped out. The man. Not some ripped gym bro. Not some flashy executive type. He was average. A little taller than me, dressed in casual clothes, probably early 40s. Confident posture. Easy smile. And he had the nerve to kiss her forehead before stepping back inside my house like he belonged there. Like I had been edited out of the picture and this was the corrected version. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes? 30? An hour? I don't remember. But eventually, I drove off. Not because I didn't want to confront her, but because I knew if I did, she'd turn it on me. She'd twist it, say I was stalking, that I was unstable. She'd point out that I left. And she'd be right. I had no leverage, no ground to stand on. Not anymore. So instead of showing up, I decided to gather everything quietly. To build the full picture. Maybe for closure. Maybe to finally believe I wasn't crazy. Maybe just to feel like someone saw what was happening to me. I stayed at the motel another week. Used a prepaid debit card I'd hidden in an old toolbox and kept to myself. But each night I went back to the neighborhood. I watched, from different angles, different streets, always from a distance. That's how I learned his name. One night, the stranger left in a black Honda. I followed. He went straight to a condo complex about 20 minutes away, and when he got out I finally saw it, his work badge clipped to his backpack. Lincoln Mayfield. That name hit me like cold air. Not because I knew it, but because Margot had mentioned it once, maybe a year ago. Some guy at corporate named Lincoln, she'd said, rolling her eyes, thinks he's charming, but he's not. I remember because I joked, well, with a name like Lincoln, he'd better be charming. She hadn't laughed. Now he was standing barefoot in my kitchen, kissing my wife. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was surgical, silent. She had slowly removed me from her life like a splinter, carefully, deliberately, and now, the wound had healed over with someone else's hands holding hers. But what shook me more was what I found next. I went back to the house 2 days later. This time, I noticed something taped to the side of our mailbox. Sticky note. It was nearly torn in half from the wind. It said, Lowell, if you're still around, we should talk. Damn. I stared at that note like it was written in a foreign language. A week ago, she hadn't said a word. Now, after all this, she wanted to talk? Why? What was left to explain? I didn't respond. Instead, I waited 2 more days. Then, when I was sure no one was home, I walked up to the house and used the spare key she had no idea I still had. I stepped inside quietly. The air smelled different, like new candles, a new detergent. But the layout was the same. My shoes were still by the door. My coffee mug still hung on its hook. It was like I'd died and no one had bothered to clean up after me. I wasn't there to make a scene. I went straight to the bedroom and opened the closet. Half my clothes were still there. But tucked behind the hanging suits I found a shoebox. One I hadn't seen before. Inside were receipts, notes, and photos. Photos of her and Lincoln. At a park. At a restaurant. One from 3 months ago. Dated, showing them holding hands in the exact spot where she and I took our anniversary photo years ago. That was the moment I realized something deeper. This hadn't been casual. This had been orchestrated. She had replaced memories. Replaced me. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoebox in my lap, and thought, how long was she planning this? Then I heard a sound. The front door opened. I froze. The shoebox still in my hands. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs. For a second, I considered hiding in the closet like some terrified teenager. But I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could only listen. The sound of the door clicking shut, footsteps on hardwood, her voice humming, like she was in a good mood. She didn't notice anything at first. I heard her drop her keys on the counter. The unmistakable creak of the fridge opening. Then the clink of a glass. I sat there, heartbeat in my throat, trying to process what I was even doing. I'd come here for answers, to see with my own eyes the wreckage I'd only guessed at. But now, with her just down the hall, I felt small, pathetic, like some shadow of myself sitting in a room that used to feel like home. Then the footsteps got closer, soft, careless. Mason? She called out suddenly. That name again. I didn't move. I wasn't sure if I should answer or let her walk in and find me like that. Shoebox open, guilt spilled across the comforter. She stepped into the doorway, and when she saw me, she actually jumped. Her hand flew to her chest. Lowell? What the? I stood up, box still in hand. I didn't say anything, just looked at her, watched her eyes shift from shock to anger to something else. Pity, maybe. You can't just come in here like this, she said finally. I held up one of the photos. How long? Her lips parted like she was going to come up with a lie, but nothing came. Then she sighed and leaned against the doorframe like she was tired of the whole thing. Long enough, she said quietly. It wasn't even the answer that broke me. It was the way she said it. Flat, dismissive, like it wasn't worth unpacking. I found the box, I told her. I figured you would eventually. That made me snap. So you just kept a scrapbook of your betrayal? Like a twisted photo album of how you built a new life on top of the old one? She crossed her arms, but not defensively, more like she was cold and didn't want to deal with emotion. You left, Lowell? No, I said sharply. You made me leave. You stopped speaking. You erased me piece by piece until I didn't recognize myself. I disappeared because I wasn't sure I even existed to you anymore. Silence. She looked at the floor. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she mumbled. But it did, I said. And then her face changed. She looked up and asked, so what now? You came here for what? Closure. I looked down at the photo in my hand. I thought of all the years. All the mornings I made her coffee. All the times I sat quietly in a room waiting for her to acknowledge I was still breathing. I came to say goodbye, I said. She blinked like that caught her off guard. And for the first time I saw something crack. Her jaw tensed, just a little. I stepped past her slowly. She didn't stop me. But just before I reached the front door, she said something soft, almost too soft to hear. You were never the villain in this, Lowell. I stopped, hand on the doorknob. No, I replied, turning slightly. But I sure felt like the ghost. And with that I walked out. For real this time. The air outside hit different after that conversation. It wasn't just colder, it felt sharper, like the whole world had moved on a little without me. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just walked to the car and sat there with the door open, trying to figure out what the hell that moment even was. Was it closure? Or just confirmation that I had wasted more time than I wanted to admit? I started driving without a destination. I passed the grocery store we used to visit on Sundays. The diner where we once argued about a movie and ended up laughing so hard we got free pie. All these places used to feel like markers in our story. Now they felt like bad memories attached to scenes I wasn't in anymore. When I finally got back to the motel, I tossed the shoebox on the floor and collapsed onto the bed. I was too wired to sleep but too drained to be awake. I just lay there, staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking about everything she said and everything she didn't. Around 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. I nearly didn't check it. I thought it might be another, "Are you okay?" from Emery or some spam text from a pharmacy I never visited. But it was from her. Margot. One line. You really don't want to know the whole story, do you? I stared at that message for a long time. Was that bait? Was that guilt? Or was there actually more she hadn't told me? Against my better judgment, I typed. What does that mean? No reply. Nothing. Not that hour, not the next day. It just hung there, unanswered like everything else between us. But now my brain was racing. What didn't I know? It was Lincoln, right? That was the betrayal. That was the story. What else could there be? I couldn't let it go. I started doing something I hadn't done since college, digging. Searching. Looking for anything connected to that man. I looked up his social media. I scrolled through tagged photos, checked mutual friends, read old posts. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. Then something caught my eye. A photo of him at a holiday party dated over a year ago with his arm around Margot. Not holding her waist like a friend. Not casually. Intimately. And the post was by someone else entirely. A woman named Elise with the caption. Back when things were still normal. Miss you every day, L. Miss you? I clicked her profile. Public. A few sad posts. A tribute. Lincoln had died. 5 months ago. A car accident. So who was in my kitchen? I sat up so fast I nearly knocked over the motel lamp. My hand shook as I double-checked the dates, the tags, the obituary linked in Elisa's post. There was no denying it. Lincoln Mayfield, the man I thought I'd seen kissing my wife in our kitchen, had died in a highway collision almost half a year ago. It was real. There was a candlelight vigil. News coverage. Condolences from coworkers. It was all there, archived in the cold permanence of the internet. So who the hell had I followed home? I racked my brain trying to remember details. Had Margot ever said his last name? Or had I just filled in the blanks when I saw the badge clipped to the man's bag? Could that ID have belonged to someone else? A reused lanyard? A borrowed bag? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had made assumptions, ones that no longer made sense. And then her message echoed in my mind again. You really don't want to know the whole story, do you? I did now. The next day, I drove back to our neighborhood, not to the house this time, but to a small cafe a few blocks away. It was quiet, half empty. The kind of place where no one cared who you were or why you looked like you hadn't slept in days. I messaged Margot from across the street. One line. Tell me. She replied 15 minutes later. Meet me in 30. Don't come to the house. She showed up dressed casually, no makeup, hair pulled back in a way that made her look 10 years younger. But her eyes, those had changed. They looked darker, not with eyeliner, but with something heavier. Maybe regret. Maybe just fatigue. We sat down at a corner table. No greeting. No smiles. I know you think I was cheating, she said right away. I saw him, Margot. I saw you with him. You think you did? That sentence made my stomach twist. He's not who you think he is, she said slowly. And this whole time I didn't tell you because I thought you couldn't handle the truth. But now? You left. You already walked away. So maybe you deserve to know. I waited. She looked down, tapped her nails against the ceramic cup, then said, his name is Eric. Not Lincoln. He's my half-brother. I blinked. What? Same father. Different lives. I didn't even know he existed until a year ago when our dad died and left us both letters. He wanted us to meet. So we did. Quietly. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to explain the mess. And when you started pulling away, I figured, what's the point? My head spun. You could have told me. You wouldn't have understood. Try me. Her voice got sharp. You disappeared, Lowell. I was trying to build some piece of my identity that wasn't about being your wife. And suddenly I had this entire other family history dropped in my lap. You think I didn't struggle with it? You think that was easy? I wanted to argue, but I didn't even know what I was angry about anymore. The lies? The silence? Or the idea that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't cheated and I had built the whole betrayal in my head. So what about the photos? I finally asked. The box? Her jaw clenched. Eric helped me track down family records, places connected to our father. That park? That restaurant? Those were places our dad used to go. I kept the photos because I was trying to connect with him. With our past. I wasn't replacing you. I stared at her, trying to read between the lines. It sounded true, but something still didn't feel right. And what about that night I saw you laughing on the porch? I asked. You looked like you were on a date. She actually laughed. Lowell, I was laughing because he tripped over Benny's leash and nearly face-planted into the grill. I swear to God, that's all it was. It was absurd. Mundane. Completely harmless. And yet it unraveled everything I thought I knew. All the anger. The heartbreak. The betrayal. What if I had misread it all? What if I'd created the story of a cheating wife because the alternative, that she had drifted away from me without malice, was harder to live with? I don't know what to do with this, I admitted quietly. She looked at me, softer now. You don't have to do anything. But maybe stop assuming you were the only one hurting. I left the cafe without saying goodbye. My mind was buzzing. Not just with guilt, but with confusion. I had disappeared to escape a betrayal that might not have even happened. Or worse, maybe I betrayed her by not asking, not listening, not being curious enough to care what was really going on. But that night, just as I was trying to fall asleep back at the motel, I got a call. Blocked number. I answered. A man's voice came through the line. You should stop asking questions about Eric, he said. For your own good. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone long after the call ended, the screen still glowing faintly in the dark. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a prank. A wrong number. But no, he'd said the name. Eric. And his voice wasn't playful. It was calm. Cold. Measured, like he'd done this kind of thing before. Like he was used to issuing quiet threats and never being questioned. For the next hour, I sat in bed, listening for every creak, every gust of wind outside the thin motel walls, half expecting someone to knock on the door or worse. But the silence just stretched on. I didn't sleep. I didn't even lie down. I paced the small room, going over every conversation I'd had with Margot, every memory of the man I'd seen in our kitchen. Was it possible there was more to this half-brother story than she had admitted? By the next morning, my exhaustion was layered with paranoia. I pulled out my laptop and started digging harder this time. Not just Facebook and LinkedIn. I started searching property records, old court documents, anything that might give me more context. I couldn't find an Eric Mayfield related to Margot. In fact, I couldn't find an Eric tied to her in any public records. But I did find something strange. A restraining order filed 5 years ago by a woman named Elise Dunn, the same Elise who had posted the tribute to Lincoln. The subject of the order? Eric Langston. The violation? Repeated harassment, impersonation, and suspected identity fraud. I stared at the screen, trying to fit the pieces together. Why would Margot say his name was Mayfield? Was she protecting him or lying to me again? My stomach turned as I scrolled through the court record summaries. It didn't take much reading to realize that whoever this Eric was, he had a history of pretending to be people he wasn't. Charming his way into people's lives. Then leaving chaos behind. I printed what I could and drove straight to the cafe where we'd met. This time I waited for Margot. I knew she'd come eventually. She always stopped by mid-morning on Fridays. When she walked in, she looked surprised to see me, but not afraid. That bothered me more than anything. You told me his name was Mayfield, I said, skipping the small talk. She stiffened, instantly defensive. What are you doing? I slid the paper across the table. This is who you've been spending time with. This is who you let into our house. She glanced at it and her reaction was not what I expected. She didn't look shocked or angry. She looked ashamed. I didn't know at first, she admitted. He said his name was Mayfield. That he worked in corporate. That he found me through our father's will. He told me things only someone from our family could have known. So why didn't you tell me when you found out? I asked. Because by then it was already too late. He had me wrapped up in it. He'd made me question everything, my memories, my past, even us. And when I realized who he really was, I thought maybe I deserved it. For everything I didn't tell you. It hit me hard the way she looked when she said that. Like she was carrying more weight than she could admit. This wasn't just about lies. This was about being manipulated by someone who knew how to weaponize loneliness. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked. She hesitated. I tried. Once. But there wasn't enough to charge him. He's careful. He doesn't leave a trail. And the worst part? He never did anything that would raise alarms. Just enough to keep me uncertain. And now he's threatening me. She looked up at that, her eyes sharp. He called you. I nodded. Her expression darkened. Then we need to stop pretending this is just about hurt feelings. He's not done. Not yet. We left the cafe together. And for the first time in months, there was no silence between us, just a growing storm neither of us fully understood. But as we pulled up to her house, we both went still. The front door was wide open. And the shoebox, the one I thought I left in the bedroom, was sitting on the front steps, empty. The sight of the empty shoebox on the front steps hit us both like a silent alarm. Margot didn't move. I stepped forward first, scanning the porch, then slowly pushed the door open the rest of the way. The house wasn't trashed. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing missing, at least not visibly. But it felt off. Like someone had walked through with gloves on and a mission in mind. Margot followed me in, her arms folded tightly, jaw clenched. We moved through the house together, living room, kitchen, bedroom. Everything was in place. Everything except for that shoebox. And the strange fact that it had been left outside, not taken, not destroyed, but returned. Emptied. He wanted us to see it, she said quietly behind me. It took me a second to realize what she meant. This was a message. I nodded slowly. He knows we're on to him. And he doesn't care. But for once, I didn't feel scared. Not really. Because something else had changed in me. I wasn't standing in this house anymore as a ghost of who I used to be. I wasn't invisible or forgotten or waiting to be acknowledged. I was here because I chose to be. And Margot? She wasn't my enemy anymore. She was just someone else who'd been pulled under by something bigger and darker than both of us. We spent that night not talking about Eric. Not digging into what-ifs. We sat on the couch, the same one I used to fall asleep on when we were barely speaking. But this time we talked. Really talked. About the distance. About the silences we both let grow like cracks in a wall we were too tired to fix. She cried. So did I. There were no dramatic declarations. No promises. Just honesty. It was more than I'd had in years. The next morning, she filed a second police report, and this time I backed her up with everything I had. The documents. The texts. The call log. It wasn't much, but it was something. Enough to open a case. Enough to put him on record. A week later, we moved out of the house. We didn't sell it right away. We just left. A friend of Margot's had a small place upstate, quiet, unremarkable, safe. That's where we stayed while we figured out what the hell came next. Not as husband and wife, necessarily, but as people who had survived something twisted together. She started seeing a counselor. So did I, separately. We didn't rush anything. We didn't label it. Some nights we ate dinner side by side. Some nights we didn't speak at all. But it wasn't toxic. It wasn't empty. It was respectful. And real. And somewhere in that slow, awkward, healing silence, we found something that felt a lot like peace. Not perfect, but real. Months later, we sat on the same porch of that little cabin, watching the leaves change. I turned to her and asked, "Do you ever think about going back?" She smiled. Not to that house, but maybe. Somewhere new. Somewhere ours. I nodded. We never saw Eric again. Maybe the investigation scared him off. Maybe he just moved on to someone else. That thought still unsettles me. But it's not mine to chase anymore. I disappeared once because I thought I was forgotten. But I returned because I realized something more important. I wasn't lost. I just hadn't been found yet. And sometimes healing doesn't look like going back. It looks like moving forward one small, honest step at a time.